In chapter 42, we're going to talk briefly about something called incidental music. Here it is in your text. It is a grouping of pieces that is usually attached to a play of some sort, as meant to go as filler between the different acts of a play or some of the different things that are going on stage. And so incidental music becomes important here because we have a composer, Edvard Grieg, that we're going to be talking about, who's Scandinavian, actually, a little bit different than the Italians or the Germans or the Austrians that we've been talking about before. This is a painting by a fellow Norwegian here, Edvard Munch. Actually, I can't pronounce his name. I guess that's probably right. But we can see how paintings are shifting. This is much more flowing and much more open to interpretation, unlike some of the earlier paintings from the classical era. And we see that music is also flowing in the same way. Let's go right into Grieg. Nationalism becomes really important. We know all about nationalism in America because we are always very proud of our country and have great celebrations, and we write music and sing songs about the different parts of our nation, whether it be its physical attributes or the role of the people in our society. But nationalism is not something hard for us as Americans to understand. It didn't really come into being until after the fall of the monarchies. That's when people sort of started to take control of their own government and became proud of the work that they themselves were accomplishing in their native countries. So this particular page talks about all of the different schools of what would be called nationalism, and the composers wrote in the style of their country. In other words, they wanted to portray their country. This guy, Smetana right here, actually wrote a great piece of music called My Country, which used to be in the text, and they've since changed that with this new edition. But it has a really nice storyline about a river that flows through the Czech Republic, Hungary at the time. There's a lot of different schools of nationalism. They're, again, trying to portray certain ideals in their own country, and this is a new idea. This is Edvard Grieg, and he wrote this part from the incidental music, two very popular pieces of music. You've heard them both. The Mountain King song you probably heard when you were in nursery school, and the Morning Mood is something we heard on a lot of cartoons, in movies. So let's take a quick listen. And this was originally incidental music meant to portray a play, and the character being this guy, Peer Gynt. But he eventually made it into two orchestral suites. Now here's the Morning Mood. We're just going to listen to the beginning. Now, I know you all have heard that in some capacity. It's used quite often in different settings in films and cartoons and movies. And I want to move right on to the Hall of the Mountain King. We're just going to listen to a little bit of it. So this music is really popular. If we come over here to the orchestra, we get a full version of it. So I'm sure you've heard this before. Take a listen to it. It's nice. If you have kids, share it with them. It's a really fun piece of music for children. They really enjoy both of those little numbers from this incidental music, the Peer Gynt Suite by Edvard Grieg. Chapter 43, we have Johannes Brahms. He's known as one of the big threes, Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms. Brahms wrote 4 symphonies, and we're going to talk about his absolute music. So the symphony, we're kind of moving out of the classical idea of the symphony into the romantic version of the symphony, but he's very classical in the way he uses his form, 4 movements, lyrical singing melodies like we would think of in the classical era, but he takes it forward to the romantic era and brings us a longer piece. It has more instruments in it. The harmonies and the rhythms are more complex than they would be in the classical orchestra. I hate that I don't have more time to spend with Brahms because he's an amazing personality. He's a very genuine man, honest, forthright, well known for his care and detail in music. Here's this nice picture of his study. He was into absolute music. He didn't write any opera. Most of what he wrote was chamber music and symphonies. And he wrote a beautiful choral work, a requiem that he dedicated to the loss of his mother. It is profound and beautiful. And I'm going to put that in your external links so that those of you that might like to listen to a little bit of Brahms's requiem, it is it's just very calming and very helpful if you are suffering through a loss. Brahms just did an excellent job at using music to show us a profound part of life. So anyway, Brahms, an amazing composer. I want to listen to just a little bit of this symphony. It's actually not my favorite. I wish they had chosen something different, me personally, but we will hear this lovely theme that we have here. It's a very lyrical melody as we see here. You can go around humming it if you so chose to. It's a very lovely piece of music. This is from the Third Symphony. It's actually the third movement, which is one of the hallmarks here is that it's in 3. A lot of times our third movements are in a 3 meter. So you can spend more time with this if you'd like. I personally prefer Brahms's chamber music. His First Symphony and his Fourth Symphony are my 2 favorites personally. But he has a lot to offer in the way of absolute music during the Romantic era. Our last chapter in this section is going to be chapter 44, and I chose to keep opera actually in the same theme of what we're talking about for this unit rather than pass it on to the next unit, because Verdi is also known as a highly nationalistic composer. Verdi is Italian, and he really brought Italian opera to its pinnacle, I believe, along with Puccini, who we'll be talking about in the next unit. But Verdi, probably the most famous opera composer of all time. He wrote a lot of stuff that you don't realize you know, but most of you have probably heard it at some time or another. On this particular page, what I really want you to be aware of is, under the key points, we've got opera seria and opera buffa, and also this idea of bel canto. Opera seria was known, it's the Italian term for just serious opera. It's going to probably be mythological in nature. It's going to have a serious undertone and probably some sort of moral to the story. Opera buffa, which actually often has a moral to the story as well, tends to be comic. It actually came out of what used to be the castrati role. And when they got rid of the castrati and actually brought females in to sing the high roles, we then turned to the bass line, a baritone, a bass. Buffa, comic opera, usually the person singing the bass line can be comic in nature. So both of these important ideas, and bel canto actually means beautiful singing style, which means that you're going to have a lyrical, strong soprano or a strong melody line here inside of the opera, and that is a bel canto style. The opera that we're going to feature is Rigoletto. We're going to listen to just a little bit of that. And just to tell you a little bit about Verdi's life, he actually had quite a bit of tragedy in his life. Um, he lost his first wife and 2 children within 3 years of each other. So he decided actually to quit performing altogether. Here he is. And, or I should say composing. And he was convinced by a libretto that he read that was given to him that changed his mind and said, you know, this is such a great story. Maybe I will go back and put it to music. And continued on his entire life to compose many other operas. And here we go, La Scala. This was the name of the opera house, who brought home this libretto about Nebuchadnezzar, the opera being Nabucco. And then it went on to give him this amazing career. He actually wrote many operas at the very end of his life. So Aida, one of his last operas. But here we have 28 different operas. And then he also did a Requiem Mass as well, which is still performed quite often. And that you can listen to this right here if you choose to. I want to go directly into the opera for you to hear just a couple of these tunes because you're going to be more familiar with it than maybe you thought. I encourage you to read the storyline so you know what's going on. It's quite complicated, and I don't want to take the time to go through the whole thing right now. But the storyline, actually we have a quartet here that we're going to be listening to where these characters are all singing together. Now, if you want to know what they're saying, I strongly suggest that you look at the listening guide 35, which is going to be on page 250. And that way you can follow along. But let's listen to the beginning of this quartet. So already this might sound almost like an Italian restaurant. It definitely sounds very Italian in nature. They're talking to each other saying, oh, I love you. Oh, well, you're a scoundrel. And we see that this continues on. Let's go to A over here. Now, what's interesting here is that he really pours it on. You can hear it in the music. It's slow, it's thoughtful. Each word or each syllable is well planned and well thought out. Just like you could think of today, we have a charmer, we have someone who's going to really lay it on thick, and that's what the Duke is doing here. So here we have the girl saying, oh, please, I've heard this all before. This is just a game. And we're going to hear that the Duke is going to say, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And Rigoletto's kind of in the background going, ha, 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 yeah, right. So there's all these different things that are going on within the opera. And Verdi's very good at putting this quartet together. And then here at the very end, we have all 4 characters singing together, 2 men, 2 women, Gilda, Madalena, the Duke, and Rigoletto. And Rigoletto is actually kind of like the court jester. But they're all speaking together at the same time in this lovely end to this quartet. So let's listen to just a bit of this. So we hear at the very end of this video how how well he puts this all together. So take a closer listen to this, and we'll see you in the next unit.